Hello and welcome to Canadian Wealth's first live chat discussion. I'm your host, Eric Borsier, Sales Manager at Canadian Wealth. Very lucky to be sitting virtually across from my special guest, Ben Lacroix today, founder of GETIT Technologies, one of the hottest new startups in Canada going on right now. For those of you that don't know as much about Canadian Wealth as some of the others, let me give you a little description of what we do. We are a business solutions company that services all sorts of corporations. So whether you're a startup just at the beginning of your development, similar to the man that I'm going to be talking with today, or a structured corporation that's just looking to find a solution to maybe a roadblock you've been having, whether that be a website, marketing, what have you. Canadian Wealth comes in, we help find your problems, we help find solutions, and we help bring you to success. So one of our greatest success stories that we have is Mr. Ben Lacroix. He actually has been a part of Canadian Wealth prior to me even, and was one of the first startups that got me excited about wanting to work in this world and continue working at Canadian Wealth. So without me rambling on too much, let me throw it to Ben to give you a little bit of an introduction on himself here. And so hi Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. This is really exciting for me. It's funny you say that. It's been quite the journey with Canadian Wealth. So I'm excited to dive into everything and how we got to where we are today.
Came on. And so tell me a little bit about it. You came on really early with Canadian Wealth. So at what stage were you at when you got to Canadian Wealth?
Yeah, so I like to think I was pre-seed when we first came on to Canadian Wealth. I was really just an individual who had a business idea. Back then I had a name of my company, a stadium. I wasn't even incorporated or anything like that. So it was at the beginning, and I'd been doing a lot of research on how to get my company off the ground. And one of the best ways I saw by doing my research was actually going through Canadian Wealth. Now, we didn't even have a website or anything like that. So I pretty much cold called Canadian Wealth and was able to get a meeting with Alex, and it kind of just exploded from there.
No, that's awesome. So it really was when you first had that idea. And so when you came into Canadian Wealth, what stood out to you as what you were going to gain from, continuing to work at with Canadian Wealth? What was it that sort of piqued your interest right away that you saw, hey, I'm really going to gain something from continuing here?
Mm-hmm. So the first big thing for me was I'd approached a couple other, whether it was VC firms or angel groups and tech firms, and the response I always got was, sure, we can do this. It's going to cost you whatever hundreds thousands of dollars. What I really liked about Alex is that he got to know me as a founder, as well as my idea, where my passion came from. And then he was able to work out a deal where, Canadian Wealth would be a part of it and would have some skin in the game, but they would be able to provide me the tools I needed to actually start the company without, at the point where I was at, me starting a company that was in tech, it just wasn't viable. So the fact that he was able to get to know me as a founder, really figure out my vision for the company, and then he was able to come back to me with a plan on how I could get to where I wanted to be within a realistic time frame and sort of a realistic budget expecting as well.
No, and that's precisely what Alex has always taught me about. When someone needs help and they come to Canadian Wealth, it's not about necessarily that first service that we can sell you on. It's really about figuring out exactly what tools you have and what tools we can help bring in for you, and to help you succeed. So one of the first things I know one of the first services I suppose that you got with Canadian Wealth was the specialized coaching with Alex. And at the very beginning, what was your main focus during those coaching sessions like? What was he really preparing you for that early on?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a university student. I went to school and I'm a big believer in education, but education never really taught me to actually start a company. So we always learned how to, whether it was accounting or marketing, once you're up and going, what you should do. What Alex was able to do is really teach me how to get your company from an idea to getting your tech built to reality. And so what I really liked with Alex is that he sat down with me, figured out what my strengths were, what my weaknesses are. And from there, we were able to put a roadmap together that worked for all of us. And he was really able to guide me through whether it's raising capital, which was a big thing for us at the beginning, being a younger founder. I was going to need to raise capital. And so him being able to show me how to go from, writing your business plan, doing a proper pitch deck, to raising that capital, to then building your roadmap to use your capital as efficiently as possible. He really taught me, and he came from experience, how to make that happen and how to make it happen quickly as well.
No, that's awesome. And, I think that it speaks volume to, especially when you're so new at starting a company, like you mentioned yourself, right? No amount of school really preps you for the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs of what a new startup is, especially since, when you're starting something so innovative and so new, right? There's no roadmap for that, right? New products don't have a roadmap to success. There's things like it, right? It's if you're not mimicking something, but there's no exact science to it. And so for you, that support there that you got, it was really about teaching you how to become that CEO that you're going to need to be and know how to make those CFO and COO decisions a little bit, and sort of tooling that in so that you could see the bigger picture, right? And not just that smaller, hey, I have a great idea, I know it could be $1 million one day, how do I get there? And we're sort of filling in that gap knowledge, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. What I really liked with Alex off the bat too was he was honest about the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, kind of what you touched on there, where you go into the idea and you think, well, and then as you said, it's like, well, I'll start this, and in 3 months I'll be a $10 million company, in a year I'll be at $1 billion, and he was really, you're gonna have ups and downs, you're gonna want to quit, you're gonna have highs, and it's how do you minimize that sort of up and down and just try to keep a level head through it all. So that was absolutely massive, because unless you are an entrepreneur or you speak to an entrepreneur, no one will be able to understand those ups and downs. So that was another huge thing that Alex did for me, and all the fact that he didn't sugarcoat it for me either, and he really made sure that I was ready to dive in. That's another thing that really gave me confidence into it. Right? He wasn't just trying to sell me a product, and Canadian Wealth wasn't about just you can't start and you spend the money and you're off to the races. It was really about preparing me as a person to take on the challenge.
Amazing. And so would you say coming on board with Canadian Wealth really was more like your first hire, really, in terms of we always like to say when we help out a founder, right, we come in as almost like a co-founder in that sense, and we come in more in a teaching sense, so that when you do bring in an actual corporate advisor or director, you know what to look for. You already have the knowledge that they would have rather than just bringing them in. So that's sort of one of the pluses I definitely see that you got from those, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, Alex and the team at Canadian Wealth were really able to, fill in those gaps that I didn't have right away. It allowed me to run very lean as well, which gave me the proper funding to actually launch the company and not spend everything on, hiring people around me. Now, even up to this date, we are in hiring mode right now. We're hiring our executive team. We're sort of entering that really sort of scale mode. So we're hiring very aggressively, and having that reserve of cash that we have, because we can go ahead and hire an executive team right away, has come crucial to our success and to us actually scaling. And beyond that, even up to now, using Canadian Wealth and Alex as people to help me hire the proper staff, right, based on Alex's experience with startups and based on CanStart, has really helped me out as well. So it's not just, it's not only don't rush to hire your executive team, is when you do hire your executive team, it needs to be a quality team, and having the support of Canadian Wealth to be able to take my time and properly hire, especially for executives, that's helped me a lot as well.
No, and that's exactly what we wanted to touch on today. The whole title of the discussion is not rushing to hire your executive team. You're almost close to 2 years into your roadmap now, if I'm not mistaken. Or just completed your first year.
I just finished my first year, entering year 2 now.
Yeah. So, that's we see all the time. One of the sites that I like to go on is Angel List. And you always see new startups that have been open for maybe 3 months, 6 months, and they're looking to hire $100,000 CFO because they think that, if they hire that guy with that level of experience, he must know what he's doing. He's going to help out our startup. He'll be able to take us to success. You, on the other hand, you proved the point of when you came in, it wasn't about, okay, let's bring in the experience at a high cost. It was about finding the right experience for you that could then took you 12 months. And now, like you said, now you're finally ready to have that rapid growth and that rapid expansion, almost 13 months in now, right? But that's where, like you said, you saved that extra reserve of cash. You were better prepared for it. And would you say that you're more confident right now in terms of who you are going to hire and who you're looking for than what you might have been maybe 6 or 7 months ago?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's great having a team behind you, whether it's your advisors or Canadian Wealth, being able to give you help in hiring. Right. It's good to have another pair of eyes or 5 pairs of eyes in the room when you're trying to make a hire, because it does make a big difference for your company. You're right. It's capital, it's time. You have to onboard the person. You have to make sure they're a right fit. You want them to fit the culture. And so having Canadian Wealth by my side helps a ton with being able to make sure that I'm hiring the right people. So absolutely, that's something that's helped up to today. And that really speaks to having Canadian Wealth on your side, and as a startup or as a young founder, getting advisors on your board, as quality advisors that fit what you're trying to grow as quickly as possible, even before hiring your CFO or whatever expensive C-level executive you want to bring on, is with the help of Canadian Wealth, because they're covering those bases for me, I'm able to go out and bring executives in other industries as advisors to really help guide me as well as the company through its challenges. And we've just seen one of the biggest challenges ever for startups, which is COVID. And the fact that I had a great team of advisors and Canadian Wealth with me to help me navigate that uncertainty is one of the main reasons why today we are still a company, and we've gone from a great idea that was very niche to one that can, it's 5 times bigger than our original idea. It was with the help and support of Canadian Wealth for sure.
So I do actually would love to touch on that with you, Ben, because as you know, like I said, you were already a part of Canadian Wealth when I started, and back then you were known as just Stadium. So you've now transitioned into that COVID phase, and now doing bigger and better things now with GETIT Technologies. It's expanded on what Stadium used to be and is now exploding a little bit more. So throughout COVID, with that support, where would you say was the Canadian Wealth the most beneficial during that time? And did you guys have to sort of refocus and rearrange how you were going to progress? Because like you said, you did actually see growth during COVID. You're one of the few that, did see how you took COVID and the terrible situation that it was and expanded yourselves and broke into even more of a market than you had. So how involved was Canadian Wealth with that? And how much support were we giving you at that time to help you make that difficult decision? And I'm sure some difficult ones during that time that helped you get here.
Yeah, just to give you a story on everything, you're right. We started off at a Stadium. It was a great idea. It was going extremely well. We had our tests lined up. Our tech was ready to go. And unfortunately, March 15th, I believe the NHL season got canceled. All sports are canceled. Events are canceled. And so, we went back to my board of advisors, and I went back to Alex and I said, so what are we going to do? So we started, talking to universities because at that point schools weren't canceled yet. So we had done a bit of a pivot, and we're, talking to different schools, and that was going well. And then obviously schools were shut down completely. But what we saw through this is we had a lot of business owners come to us and ask us if there's a way for them through COVID to use our technology and for them to, at a cost-effective price, get into mobile technology. And at first we were kind of trying to figure out how we were going to do that, and it sort of became bigger and bigger. And where Canadian Wealth came in is we had to restructure some of our technology. So our technology was great and it was ready for Stadium, but we wanted to bring it into the real world and build local marketplaces, which is really what we're doing right now. And we're excited to say that we're helping local businesses with a cost-effective technology. But what Canadian Wealth was able to do is obviously the guiding from Alex and from the team, and helping us grow in a way that was going to help us 10x our growth over the next few years. But being able to also now have that back end technology where we have a full dev team without having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to make sure that we're able to navigate through COVID was absolutely huge for our company, and making sure that we could actually launch within a decent time frame, or within the time frame we had set with our partners. So for us, the fact that we had access to a full dev team as part of our deal with Canadian starting with Canadian Wealth is what allowed us to shift our company and to pivot so quickly. And as you said, we're one of the few companies that have been able to grow during COVID, and our technology is one of the main reasons for that.
No, that's awesome. And that's sort of the flexibility that really intrigued me about joining Canadian Wealth back when I did as well, was that it wasn't just about covering one aspect of a founder's startup or a company's structure. It was about coming in at each and every department almost. Even when you first started out, it's really like you did get an entire team of people behind you, straight down to the dev team, straight down to the sales, with Alex, I'm sure, coaching you on that as well. So that sort of confidence that you get from having that level of a partnership behind you on a day-to-day basis, where, like you said, you can sort of focus on all the other aspects of things. You can focus on the business aspect, promoting your product, thinking about all the tweaks that you want to do without having to worry about, oh man, am I gonna need to hire a dev guy? Okay, I got to check in with my financial people because I got to figure all of that out. Especially as a young startup, that must have taken so much off your shoulders, and I'm sure allowed you to be a little bit more creative when a situation like COVID happens,
Right.
because you don't have that added stress and all of those extra things on your shoulders that are being covered, right?
Oh, absolutely. Again, it's we are hiring or starting to hire a tech team in-house right now, just because we are growing so aggressively. But you're absolutely right. The fact that we can pick up the phone or a Skype call and have a dev, on the line pretty much right away, and being able to tell them the tweaks we want made and what we need to grow, and have Canadian Wealth be right there with us to help is massive. And it allows us, because one of the best things about being a startup is that you're nimble. You can make decisions quickly. It doesn't have to go up, 7 levels of executives and up the chain. We're able to make quick decisions, adjust to the market. And the fact that we have Canadian Wealth support behind us allows us to actually make those quick decisions and actually act on them, not just make that decision right away. Which as a startup, we have always believed is one of our biggest advantages.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the other advantages I sort of have picked out, especially with COVID these days, is the adaptability of Canadian Wealth and how we actually bring you support. When you look at, had you hired a partner or a CEO at the time, someone like that, with COVID, when everything changes to now Skype meetings and Zoom meetings, are the new normal now. That's something that Canadian Wealth was always sort of ahead of the game on, in terms of, we're always accessible. And that's something as well that I've noticed. And would you say that as well? It's a much different mentality than it was maybe 20 years ago about how you had to help a business or how you had to help a startup. It doesn't have to be necessarily hands-on. You're in Ontario and Alex is in Calgary, so it just goes to show that level of support that is there even remotely, and how now with COVID, it sort of pre-prepped you even for the worst, would you say?
Well, yeah, obviously, no one saw COVID coming, but the fact that we were already, in Zoom meetings with Alex, on a weekly basis, we were absolutely ready for that. And the cool thing about Canadian Wealth too is it takes away, as you said, sort of the borders, right? Where, I had a great business model, And Alex also had a great business model to help startups. And the fact that he went online with Can Start and was able to spread it, throughout Canada, that allowed us to actually take advantage of it. Where the older mentality would have been, well, as a company, you've got to pick up and move to Calgary, and you have to, go to his office or whatever every day. So we were able to, I think for Canadian Wealth, that's a huge gain, is they can help any startup anywhere. And as Zoom gets better and Skype gets better because of COVID, it's only going to become more and more streamlined. So I think the service they offer will just be getting better.
Well, exactly. And, that's one of the cool things is that different way of doing business that Canadian Wealth presents itself. You and I we're both slightly younger than the guys that we work with a lot in business. We're a little bit sophomores in the startup landscape. Like you said yourself, you're a year old in this. I've only really been servicing startups myself for almost a year now with Canadian Wealth. And so, sorry about that. So that's when we're looping that back into, had you brought in a CEO at the very beginning over Canadian Wealth. One of the things that you can think of as well is that you're not hiring an employee when you're coming in with Canadian Wealth, right? There's always that added, as a founder, right? When you hire someone to come in and work under you, or even with you as an executive or something like that, it's still someone that you're always sort of looking out for. It's another stress on your head a little bit, making sure that they're on their ball as well. Was that stress also eliminated for you? And was that confidence sort of built there because of the way that Canadian Wealth comes in, rather than it being, an interview round and then you're hiring that person and they're collecting a paycheck from you, rather than coming to Canadian Wealth and just having more of a support system there?
Well, I mean, the whole big thing too is Canadian Wealth has skin in the game with me, which means that my best interest is their best interest as well. We both want to see this grow. And so from that perspective alone, that was huge. The fact that they weren't collecting a paychecks, they were actually they're in the trenches with me, trying to grow this from something that was essentially an idea to a reality. But the other great thing is my first executive hire was one of my advisors. And so having Canadian Wealth next to me enabled me to actually take my time, figure out who I wanted to bring on as my first big hire. And then once I did hire them, I had trust in them as a person and as an executive, where they were able to come on board, and I didn't have to do any of that babysitting. They already had a ton of experience. They knew what the business model was, and we were able to grow from there. So it really, the flexibility of taking my time for that first, those first few hires that are going to eventually be, your number 2, your number 3. That was a big, advantage of having that Canadian Wealth support next to me.
Great to hear that. I'm always happy to hear that support's there. That's the biggest thing when we look back on the subject title, not rushing into having an executive team. That's really where the benefit lies with Canadian Wealth, is we give you time. We give you a proper roadmap. We're not trying to rush into it. I think one of the biggest things that founders always say when they first start out is that they want perfection right away. Especially if you've never started a company, you always want, the perfect technology. You want the perfect team, the perfect sales guy, the perfect accounting software. You want all of it to be perfect. And when you do make a hire very early on, it's very easy for a founder to get excited and possibly miss certain steps and miss certain cues of, is this person really right for my startup? And that's where, your experience with us is such a good representation. Why I wanted to have this discussion with you was because you did get that time. You did get 12 months to really sort of prep yourself and know exactly what you were looking for. And so that's one of the keys for us here. We're starting to get some fan questions, actually. Would you like to answer a couple here?
For sure, yeah, we can do a couple.
All right, awesome. So Sean has a question for you. I have a question for Ben. I'm having issues with two of my advisors. They don't seem to see my vision and where we want to go with the company. Is this something you faced, and how are you handling the situation?
Not necessarily. When we brought advisors on board, we really made sure that they believed in the company from the beginning, and what we were going towards. But there's always going to be friction, between you and your advisors a little bit, just based on the fact that everybody has maybe a different vision for the company. But I think the important thing is to lay out your vision statement and your mission to your advisors, and really making sure that you can keep them in the loop with what you're doing, and explain to them why you're making the decisions you're making. At the end of the day, your advisors are there to advise you, and it's advising, so you should take that as an advisory, take it under your wing, and sort of play around with it. But at the end of the day, you're the CEO, and you're the one calling the shots there. So I would say, for me at least, I've been fortunate enough to have advisors that have believed in both myself as well as our company. And for me, it was really making sure that I keep them in the loop, and that I listen to their advisements, and sort of come back to them with a roadmap based on some of their advisements. But there's always going to be a couple disagreements here and there. That's just normal for a business.
So with advisors, when you came with Canadian Wealth, did you already have an advisor team or an advisor board, or was that something that actually happened after you joined Canadian Wealth?
My first two advisors were right around the same time. So I had started pitching my business to a couple of executives that I've been looking up to that were in my circle. Which, it's funny, some of them were actually my friend's parents. So I started pitching a couple of them. But again, the idea really resonated with a lot of people. And so, we were able to bring them on board right away. And they were always able to really help us with the support. And at the same time, I was also bringing Alex on. And when it came to advisors, the fact that I had a business partner also gave them the confidence to actually come on board and, put their name into the company as advisors. So having Alex come on board actually really helped me with some of my advisors as well.
And that's actually a great transition into sort of the next topic I want to bring on to that, actually, is when you are looking for investors. You've been through multiple stages of that early on. Even now, you're starting another funding round. Where did Canadian Wealth really come in and help you out in that aspect? And like you said, how much of an advantage was it when pitching your business either to potential advisors or potential investors, having that backing of Canadian Wealth behind you, where you could reference us and say, hey, look, I already have this entire team behind me? How much of an advantage was that?
Oh, well, there's two really big advantages to it. The first one, having backing from, a company that's put money or resources into you always helps, whether it's your own confidence or showing people that there are other people buying in. That investor you're pitching, or that advisor isn't the only one actually buying in. There's others. That's huge. And the fact that I can, pull my phone out and actually show them the technology. It's not just a pipe dream. It's real. It's functional. It works. That's absolutely massive in pitching. It really takes down a lot of those barriers. For me, being maybe a little bit younger and a first-time founder, having that support and that team behind me to help guide me, that's huge in terms of investment. And the second one is the coaching. Having Alex sort of coach me as to maybe how investors are thinking, what their strategy is, that's helped me a lot. And it also helped that, you're not going to be able to close everybody you pitch. And so having Alex, keep reminding me that you just have to keep pushing, keep pitching. It's a numbers game. That helps me a lot. So both the coaching as well as the backing were two crucial things, and allowing us to have such a successful pre-seed round. And now that we're entering our seed round, that's already gotten a ton of traction for us. So having that coaching and that backing, it's done a lot for us as a company.
And now that you do have a little bit more of a team behind you, that coaching that comes for yourself, that's been there since you started, that doesn't only include yourself now, right? That knowledge gets, shared in with the team that you do end up bringing on board now, right?
Absolutely. Coaching is expensive. So the fact that we were able to get that from CanStart, it helped us both on the financial point as well as, for me growing into the executive I know I can become. So that coaching was imperative for my growth and for the company's growth. But absolutely, now that whether it's me talking to a coach and, sending that message along to the team, or actually sometimes we'll have group calls where there's multiple people on the call with Alex, and we're just discussing different business ideas, business development, and getting his perspectives and coaching. It does trickle into your team as well, definitely.
No, awesome. And actually, funny enough, one of the Tick Twitch asked a very similar question to mine just now. So would you say that having an existing company invested in the position of a support role was more integral to your growth than just cash investors? So if you would like to go ahead, I think we did answer a little bit of that just before, but if you do want to give a little bit more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, investors often want to see that you have backing from other people, right? It's a lot less scary to deploy capital into an idea that has backing from other people than to go in cold. So the fact that we were able to show that, we had someone who had invested a good amount of resources into our company, that really helped us. And I think once you're pitching, past friends and family, people that are more, I guess, seasoned investors, or whether it's an angel investor, they really want to see that you have been able to successfully raise capital and raise, resources from other sources. And again, it comes down to actually having the technology and it not being just an idea anymore, right? Being able to walk into a pitch and, have investors say, well, this is great. How are you going to make it happen? It's like, well, it is already happening. Here's my technology. It was built by, an award-winning developer. It gives you a ton of confidence, and it gives you the credit you need to actually raise more capital, get to that next level as fast as possible.
No, absolutely. I definitely concur with that, where I definitely see, rather than just saying, yeah, here's my team of 3 executives that I've hired over my first year. This is what we can manage and sort of look over that we're hoping to develop with it. Instead of having that, you actually had that full team behind going, look, yeah, this is the technology that you're going to be investing into. We're already starting it. It's already, getting going. So that definitely gives you that advantage and that extra bit of confidence going into those meetings, I'm sure.
Absolutely. It's, and even from a founder mentally standpoint, being an entrepreneur is difficult. You have a lot of ups and downs. That's normal. But the fact that that someone else has bought into your idea, it does give you that confidence to just keep pushing forward and keep falling forward, is the expression that Alex always gave me. Is, you're going to fall every once in a while. So it's falling forward, getting back up, and knowing that people believe in you really helps you get back up quickly and get on to the next challenge or the next project.
For sure, for sure. So another question from the live chat: how did Canadian Wealth help you with funding? I think the biggest problem for startups is having the money to start, even more so during COVID. That was sent by over L Tron. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. But yeah, so Ben, if you want to answer that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, raising capital is never easy, and it's definitely not easy during COVID. COVID has made raising capital for startups one of the hardest things you can do. But what investors really want to see is traction, whether that's your technology being built, whether that's a contract, whether that's, reoccurring revenue. So the fact that as a company, even if you're pre-revenue, being able to have your technology built and ready to go to market is a huge amount of traction. And so that really shows, to investors that you're serious about what you're doing, and you're actually going out there and building what your vision is. So that's really where Canadian Wealth helps with that. And again, the fact that when investors are asking you, well, do you have any startup experience? Well, we can point to Canadian Wealth. We can point to Alex. Those show that, our board has the ability to help us navigate the startup scene, because it is running a startup is different than running a, well-established company. And so having, CanStart and Alex behind us just shows them that we actually have someone in the day-to-day who's actually able to guide us through, I guess the startup grind, we like to call it. So that's definitely where that sort of comes from, and it's a huge advantage in raising capital right now.
No, that's great. And obviously, as well, one of the things with Canadian Wealth that distinguishes us from other firms is because all of our services are sort of all in one, right? We don't just need that sale right away. So when we do talk about the, technical development, we're almost starting to work on that even before you sign that first check to us to get it started, because we know that that's on the roadmap, right? And you said it before, we took skin in the game early because we believed in your product and we knew that it was worth it. And that's something that's even more beneficial almost to a young startup than finding an investor, because rather than it, needing to find $200,000 to build technology, you're needing to find maybe 50,000 to get it started. Because with Canadian Wealth, we're not just looking for the whole amount, we're looking to work with you, figure out how do we make sure that we're going to see you succeeding in 2 years, rather than just making our own sort of sale on the side there. And that sort of support is also how us coming in with funding is we can sort of break it down for you. Rather than be a new startup with just a business plan looking for 500,000 to get started, you can come in and with 10,000 looking for 50, because you can still start at that same step, right?
Well, absolutely. It's a lot easier to raise capital once you have a product. But to get a product, you have to raise capital, and it's hard to raise capital without a product. So the fact that you're taking that wall away, and you're able to actually build your product and then go out to people and pitch them, not just on the idea, but on the actual execution, helps out a lot.
And since COVID, so how different has your pitch strategy changed with COVID from what you were doing, say, 6 months ago, before the new year, even when you were still trying to find investors, maybe at that time? How has your pitch changed now due to that, to help you get those that extra funding, now that it is a little bit harder to even find funding during COVID?
Well, I mean, for us, we had to essentially pivot and go into another direction for the next little bit, because COVID didn't just affect our business model; it killed it. There are no sports or events going on right now. We had no business for the next couple of years probably. So when we pitch now, we actually pitch the fact that as a team we were resilient enough to not just sort of take it and just wait the next 2 years. Is we're actually getting ahead of we're getting ahead of it, and we're creating new opportunity based on what's going on in the market. So now we don't only pitch the stadium idea, but we're creating a business that's 5 to 10 times the size of what it is right now, and we really want to highlight that, and we highlight the fact that we've worked with our tech team, where our tech's not just for stadiums now. We can venture out into universities, hotels, local marketplaces for cities. It's gotten so much bigger that we really need to get that message across to investors that our original idea was great. This is 10 times bigger, and getting that message across is something that's really exciting for us. But I think, look, if you're running a startup in COVID and you're pivoting and it's growing, you need to get that message across to as many people as possible, that as a founder, you're resilient. When times get tough, you're still there, and you're going to push through no matter what happens and what gets thrown your way.
Resiliency, definitely a big part of it, especially during COVID right now. I mean, obviously, when we talk about having a startup, resiliency is one of the biggest things, regardless of a pandemic that's going on. And then when you start incorporating a pandemic thrown in there, you definitely have to keep putting your head forward, keep pushing through. And, you're definitely a story of someone who did that. You pivoted. I'm sure there was many a session, possibly with Alex, where, you had to really dig deep to come up with that, that change of pace, right?
Well, exactly. And we were fortunate enough to have a great team of support around us, where we actually came up with, our biggest thing right now is really that local marketplace, and we're getting tremendous traction for it. It wasn't just that, it was figuring a roadmap on how to actually bring the tech to the level it needed to be for this massive jump. So having a lot of, meetings on, okay, like, how are we going to properly go about this? How can we get this done as quickly as possible? But at the same time, ensuring our tech is just as good as it was when we originally had our launch or our first technology. So that was huge. And obviously, there was a few weeks where we really didn't know what we were going to do. We had to have some team meetings and figure out what the market was saying. And again, we were getting this outpour of for help from these local businesses. And it was, us taking it in, seeing what the demand is, and as a team building essentially a new company to help deal with that demand as quickly as possible.
No, that's awesome. And so that actually transitions me into one of the next viewer questions here from Gordon Antonio. You talked about changing your original idea from the first phase. That's something viable if you're already 4 years in business and an established team. I think you meant, is that something viable if you're already in 4 years of business? So for you, Ben, out of your opinion, you made a transition earlier on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Within your first year, you made that big decision to transition off into something more. Would you say that that's something that's viable for a startup that's more than 4 years old at this point? From my personal take, I would certainly say for sure it's just about the planning, but I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot more difficult. There's more red tape, to get around. But it's, even major companies are having to pivot and having to change their offerings, right? The fact that you're a 4-year-old startup, you're still a startup. Like, you still have that. You're still nimble. Your team is still small. You can still make those changes quickly. But I think not just startups, any company in any market or ecosystem needs to make sure that they're moving with the times. And we've seen time after time companies that have, either they're big companies that have done extremely well and have been able to move with the times. And we've seen a lot of companies that have been, have gotten bloated and decided not to innovate anymore, whether they were or complacent, whether they were startups or major corporations that have just, stayed back and not made any changes. So, I'll give you a perfect example is Netflix, right? They went from mailing DVDs and TV shows to people to moving it out all online. And they were a huge startup or company when they made that switch. So I think any company of any size, it's not even should you, you absolutely should be innovating and changing your model, or at least adapting it based on what the current climate is.
I think that's a great example. Everyone always forgets about Netflix and just how young I think a startup like them really is when you come to think about it. I mean, I was in high school when Netflix really first started. I think I was getting out of high school when Netflix first started. And you're right, they were basically sending out DVDs. They were a glorified Blockbuster, really sort of the demise of Blockbuster. May it rest in peace. But you're right, where at that time as a startup for them, they saw that going forward, more and more people were getting access to technology like a computer with high-speed internet. TVs were starting to be able to have apps on them, things like that. And they switched their entire business model to a digital platform. And even Netflix at the time was actually a company that was probably about 2 or 3 years old at the time, and they completely switched over. And imagine the technological need that would have been needed from a Netflix at the time to launch something completely digital rather than, giving a physical product. So I love that example that you brought up of Netflix, being a prime example of you can always be changing, you can always be updating. I mean, you practically need to survive in today's day and age, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, we're on this live stream making it sound like it's the click of a button and but as a startup, I think, or any company, again, it's innovation is key. And you just need to figure out a way to make sure that your innovation is headed in the right direction.
Not perfect. And so another question from the live chat here, Vince Gagne. I have some friends interested in investing, but I don't know how to give them a valuation. My company is not launched yet. So what sort of advice might you have for Vince? Because I know, again, you started off very early, basically with just the idea a little bit on paper when you came to Canadian Wealth. So that is something that you had to sort of figure out and have experience with, that early valuation of what you have, right? You have $1 million idea, but that doesn't mean that it's valued at $1 million. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, valuations are always difficult, and especially as a startup, it's a little bit more in the air. But there's a couple of things you can look at. You can look at the market size. I know Wealthsimple did that when they were pitching their idea. They just said this is how big this is in the U.S. Canada has 10 times or 10 times less people, this is how big we can be and here's a valuation. But on a maybe more realistic or smaller scale, it's, your projections, is your technology built? How much is that technology worth? Your executive team, that's a big one. How big is your team? How good is your team? For me, with Canadian Wealth backing me, that was worth quite a bit as well when I started pitching other people. And so it is difficult, but, and I'll plug in Canadian Wealth here, but having the support from Alex and his financial side really helped me sort of put together a valuation that I could then, explain to investors or prospective investors on why I thought it was worth that much. So you definitely need to have people around you to help you with that. But you can kind of figure it out based on what you have at that point.
And that right there, that's sort of a situation that early on, if you were to meet Vince out in public and he asked you about that, who would you recommend him to go speak to that early on? I would definitely like to hear that.
I'm sorry. Can you just repeat that quickly?
If you could recommend Vince, because it's a very similar situation, right? It would definitely be a similar case for when you started at Canadian Wealth, right? Yeah. Needing that sort of picking out what your strengths are, what you have in place, and then really getting that pen to paper and then going forward from there.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on your business and what the industry is, what's happened in the past. Like it's hard to sort of give them an answer right away without knowing more. But I mean, yeah, it's really look at your team, look at your product. Is it built? Is it almost built? Look at the size of the market. How fast can you grow? And it's also, it's about having people believe in you as a founder. And that goes really far with pitching people and getting that valuation that you think you deserve or that your business deserves based on those criterias.
For sure. And so one of the questions just before when we were talking about funding that I'd like to touch on today, because you are going to be going through a funding round, so your pitch is actually going to be going live on Canadian Wealth's Easy VC platform. So that platform actually is sort of in a rebirth at the moment with the updates finally done on the platform. And that's definitely been another tool that Canadian Wealth has helped you out with. So far, with your experience on Easy VC, obviously our viewers today are going to be getting 3 free months to the platform for their startups as well. But how has it helped you so far in terms of structuring a pitch and getting it in front of investors that are fitting your, what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I'm big on networking and business development. So, in Eastern Canada, I've been able to get in front of some investors with soft introductions. But the toughest part for a startup, especially when you don't know people, is getting that warm introduction. And for example, for us, Easy VC gets us in front of some active investors, whether they're angels or Series A or whatever their stage is. But it gives the investor the reassurance that this company has been vetted, right? So if you go online and you contact a VC firm or you contact an angel, investor or a conglomerate of angel investors, they don't have a way, I mean, unless they go through your pitch and then they call you and there's an interview or whatever, they don't have a way of actually validating your business, if it's real, who you are. What's great about Canadian Wealth is that, or CanStart, is that there's a validation to investors that this is a real company. It has legs. And then for you as a founder, you're able to get in front of those investors and actually pitch them without them not knowing who you are or whether or not you're real. So for us, that's huge. And the other thing about CanStart is the reach, right? Like we're an Ontario-based company, and so we're growing our network in Ontario. But what I like about CanStart is that it grows my network across North America, especially out west. And that's a reach that we wouldn't have if we were just doing this, on our own. And finally, too, we've spoken about COVID. It's tough right now to go pitch people just because some people aren't comfortable going out. We might be in a shutdown soon. Who knows? It allows you to reach a lot of people without actually having to leave your house. So for me, that's another great thing about CanStart is the reach right now.
No, for sure. The reach and that sort of breaking of the ice prior to that first meeting, right? It's like almost like getting a referral basically to an investor almost, because when you are sending that pitch on the platform, those investors are already committed to Canadian Wealth in a way since they're on the platform, and they know
Yeah.
that when you do send your pitch out there to be seen by these investors, it's been vetted, it's been worked on with Alex, it's been worked on with our team. You're really ready to, when an investor sees it, they know, okay, if I contact this guy, he's ready to go. He can give me, the rest of the information that I'm missing, and we can start getting going, rather than those, extra 6 weeks, 8 weeks of you meet him once for 15 minutes to break the ice, then you meet him again for half an hour to sort of pitch the idea, then you meet him again, and it's a whole, probably cuts that out, and yet still gives you confidence in that when you do start those conversations, you're ahead of the game already, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. It takes some of the, I guess, the time away from raising capital, right? In the sense that, normally there is that 6 to 8 week process. And if it can cut down a couple of weeks, I mean, when you're raising capital, how we see it is every hour that you're spending, trying to raise capital or connecting with angels is an hour taken away from business development or actually, growing your company, growing the valuation, growing your revenues. And so the fact that it takes away, some of the red tape that comes with raising capital is huge, right? An extra, think about how much you can do with 2 weeks in terms of, business development, growing your team, chasing new deals, new leads. That's time away now where you're not actually just trying to raise capital, sending cold messages, asking for warm introductions. You're growing your company and you're increasing the valuation of it every time you do that.
Right, and it sort of allows you to, rather than having to pick one or the other direction, right? Either grow my team and focus on that, or get funding first. Like, I've seen a lot of startups where they're sort of having to make that decision, right? I have enough money to hire an executive team and get, a good CTO in that can come with me, and a good pitch man maybe, or a good COO or a good partner to come in. And when we do have those meetings with investors, we'll be prepped then with my team. Or, you go that other route where you don't make those hires necessarily right away, hoping that just the idea is enough to convince the investor to give you that funding so that you can make those hires. Rather, now with Canadian Wealth backing you there, it allows you to focus on both, right? The funding aspect is being taken care of once that pitch is out there, once you're rock solid on that. And now you spend your day-to-day focusing on the actual grits and grinds of the work. When a situation like COVID happens, you can focus on how to get out of it, rather than how am I going to get out of it and still do pitching and still do marketing and still make my 8 meetings next week and all of that. It takes that all off, and that's really the massive advantage to CanStart and Easy VC as well when you're looking for funding, is the weight off your shoulders, right? In the end of the day, even now, I'm sure with your executive team already that now you're hiring in place, they must feel that same way, where it's sort of an extra shoulder, an extra weight off of their shoulders as well, because we're still there backing you guys. Even though you've made those hires, you can have your own CFO. That doesn't mean Canadian Wealth's knowledge and expertise goes away. It means now we're supporting them as well. So that sort of also takes off of everybody else on your team, right?
No, exactly. And we really appreciate the support from Canadian Wealth, and it's going to be useful for us as a company growing. So we'll always be, we're always happy, and we're always very fortunate to have coaching and the help behind us to help.
Awesome, Ben. Awesome, Ben. We have no more questions in the chat, and so I think we're going to start wrapping things up. I want to thank you again for taking the time out. I know you're a busy guy. For me, I was super excited to have you on as my first guest for Canadian Wealth's live chat. Like I said, I've been geeking out on what you've been doing since I joined Canadian Wealth. It really was one of the first things that got me excited about joining the company. Obviously, as a big sports fan and a tech guy as well, it really caught my eye. So thank you so much for taking the time out today. I hope to speak with you again soon. I hope to keep seeing you grow and succeed as fast.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate your time. This was great.
Just going to send you all off here. Don't forget, sign up for Easy VC as a free trial online. Your accounts will be upgraded for anyone attending today. Follow Get It Technologies on LinkedIn, Instagram, anywhere else you can find them, Canadian Wealth as well. And remember, if you have a startup in need or a business that needs assistance, Canadian Wealth is there, and we can help you in any way, shape, or form. Ben's a great representation of that, and I do wish you great success. Have a great day, everybody.